What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel I'd like to talk about watch collecting. I've gotten a ton of different comments, questions, and emails from viewers over the last several years asking for my advice on their collecting habits, asking for information about my own collection and my own habits in the hobby of collecting watches. All sorts of really great questions, really great comments, and I thought I'd take a little bit of time here to do a single video that sort of encompasses everything. We'll talk about my collection, we'll talk about some of the realizations that I've come to as far as my collecting habits and my goals, and also my regrets that I've had in this hobby over the last 3 or so years. Hopefully, I'll be able to touch on some of the questions that I've gotten and give a little bit of advice to you guys on what I would do if I were in your situation. And, really kind of look at this from a top-down level. Start to explore this collecting hobby that we're also incredibly interested in. So I started getting really interested in watches probably somewhere around 3 years ago, I guess. I've been doing this YouTube channel for about 2 years, so I've really not been in this hobby for as long as a lot of you guys out there that are probably watching this video. But I've come to a lot of realizations about myself, about my collecting habits, and I think that hopefully the things that I'm about to tell you will help you out as you go down the same journey that we're all going through together. So I've been a collector basically for my whole life. Ever since I was a child, I've been interested in things like baseball cards, evolved into comic books. Truth be told, even 30-something years later, I'm still interested in comic books. But right now, primarily, my focus has been on wristwatches, and like a lot of you guys that are watching my channel, I'm sure that you've been collectors at heart for your whole life as well. There's something really special about being, a part of that community, to be of the collector mindset. I probably can't really put it into words adequately, but when you know, you know. When there's something that you're interested in, when there's something that you desire, you go through all of the time and effort that it takes to learn about it, to go through the process of obtaining that thing and adding it to your collection. It's a great feeling, it's really enjoyable, and probably the thrill of the hunt is almost a bigger part of the enjoyment of this hobby, or any collecting hobby, as it is, maybe more so than actually getting and owning the thing that it is that you're going after. When my interest in this hobby was sparked, I started out like a lot of you guys with entry-level affordable watches. The first watch, technically I guess I should say, the first watch I ever bought was a Fossil watch, and I have no shame in saying that. It was probably in the mid-1990s. I was a teenager. Something sparked an interest in watches. I don't know why. And I purchased my first wristwatch. It was probably $40. I bought it at a local shopping mall. I still own that watch today, luckily. There's nothing special about it, but it's nice to see it in my watch box and remember what it was like at that time when that first spark of interest in wristwatches happened, and I'll probably save it forever. More recently, in the last 3 or so years, my interest in watches has grown exponentially. I started out, like a lot of you guys, with more entry-level and affordable watches. I started out with a Seiko 5 SNK 809. I wanted that military field watch aesthetic, and I probably couldn't have even expressed it in those words at the time. I didn't know what a field watch was. I didn't know that there were genres of watches, but I saw a watch that had that aesthetic and I said, wow, that's really cool. I like it. I spent a bunch of time learning about watches and discovered automatic movements and mechanical movements, what the difference were between that and quartz, and we went from there. Now, one of the pitfalls of my collecting strategy, and this has always been the case no matter what I've collected, I often focus on quantity over quality. And I'm not going to say that a Seiko 5 isn't a quality watch, but I will say that I was always looking for that next piece. I went from that Seiko 5 SNK 809, and I knew relatively shortly later that I was going to want something else. Of that same genre, I discovered the Hamilton Khaki Field, and I had to have it. I went through that process of trying to decide, how can I spend close to $500 on a wristwatch? That's crazy. I just bought this Seiko for $89 or something. I could never spend that much money on something like a wristwatch. Well, the more and more time I spent going through the process, I decided I wanted to jump on it and moved up to that next tier, got myself a Hamilton Khaki Field. Absolutely loved that watch. And I still have one today, and it will always be a permanent piece in my collection. From there, I discovered dive watches and said, man, you know, my dad always wore a dive watch. Never a very high-end, expensive piece, but when I think of my father and I think of his wristwatches, I always imagine a rotating elapsed time bezel wristwatch on his wrist. Probably that would be where the dive watch interest was originally sparked for me, and I started exploring those genres. My first dive watch, I don't remember if it was a Seiko SKX007 or if it was the solar-powered Seiko, the SSC019. That was a Pro-Spec Seiko diver with a chronograph. I got both of them kind of in the same time frame. I was extremely attracted to that Pepsi bezel, so it was probably that Pro-Specs model that had that really nice, rich red and blue bezel with the blue dial, but it might have been the SKX007 because I also like more simple, more understated watches, and I could have went for that black on black bezel dial version first. I don't remember. Regardless, the interest in dive watches from that point forward was sparked, and I was off to the races. The next watch, well, I needed to get something a little dressy, I guess. I learned about the Seiko Sarb series, and the one that interested me the most was the Sarb 033. A beautiful watch, and one of my regrets is not keeping that watch. Not a particularly expensive watch by some standards. I think it was a roughly $400 watch at the time. Of course, now it's been discontinued, and if you want to pick up a 003 or a 005, you're going to pay a premium on the secondary market, unfortunately. Very cool watch, though. I wish I would have hung on to one of those. But I started to feel a trend evolving at this point. I was looking at my watch box and seeing a $100 watch, a $200 watch, a $400 watch, and before I knew it, I probably had $1,500 to $2,000 tied up in all of these affordable watches, filling up a watch box. Something that I realized about myself at that time was I wanted to go towards a quality over quantity mentality, I guess is the way I would describe it. And again, these aren't low quality watches. All of the watches that I'm discussing here are great watches, watches that I think anyone would be happy to own. But I'm the type of person where I don't want to rotate through watches daily. Some people do every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. That's not the way that I operate. I want something that is going to be difficult for me to even want to remove from the wrist. I want something that I am proud to own, something that is of extremely high quality. And I decided that I was going to remove all of those more affordable options and extremely focus on getting basically some more high-end watches in my collection. And going through that process, I looked at a ton of watches from the $1,000 to $10,000 price range, and the one that really sung to me at the time was the Rolex Explorer. I've reviewed that watch extensively. I've talked about it on my channel. That is one of my regrets, both in buying it and in selling it, and I think that is going to be a funny thing to say for a lot of people. If you know or are familiar with my Rolex Explorer videos, it just didn't end up being the right watch for me. I can't really explain why in just a few minutes. I spent months with that watch, and the longer I had it, the less it really sung to me. So in the end, I decided to sell it, but I still had that same mentality of I don't want a watch box full of a bunch of watches that I'm probably not going to wear very much. I still want something extremely high quality, something that I'm going to be really proud to own. And the search continued. At this point, my collection really only consisted of a Seiko SKX, the 007 at that time, and that was my favorite watch at the time. I thought to myself, I love dive watches, I love this watch, maybe I should consider a Rolex Submariner instead of the Explorer. The Explorer had been sold, it was a few months later, and I decided, alright, I'm going to really give some thought and effort into exploring the Submariner. When I finally decided to buy the Submariner, I got in just under the wire. As you're probably aware, getting stainless steel sports Rolex watches right now is something of a nightmare. If you really want one, you're probably going to find yourself on a wait list, or you're probably going to find yourself paying a premium on the secondary or gray market. Well, what happened to me was just after Hurricane Irma last year in 2017, we came home from the evacuation, and a lot of things were different in my area. Power had been out for weeks in a lot of places. Businesses haven't been selling any watches. I went into the Rolex authorized dealer and had a chat with the sales manager there. I said, look, here's what I want to do. I need to be under a specific price point, but I'm ready to buy today. Well, they hadn't even been open for nearly 3 weeks. They haven't sold a watch in quite a while. They were motivated to make a sale, so I was able to get a really good deal done on my Submariner. Try to do that even a month later would have been impossible. Nobody even had them in stock. So I got lucky in that I got in just under the wire and got an amazing price, at least I feel, was an amazing price on my Submariner, and I haven't looked back. So since getting that Submariner, what have I done with my collection? Well, I've had a lot of watches that I didn't mention prior to getting that Submariner that have both come and gone, mostly affordable watches, the vast majority under $500, certainly all of them under $1,000. And what I realized was some of those watches I was actually starting to miss, most notably the Hamilton Khaki Field. I still, to this day, love the Field watch aesthetic. It's pretty much my favorite design. And I decided, you know, I can afford to have these watches that really mean something to me, that I really, really love. So I went and I replaced the Hamilton Khaki Field that I had sold originally with a new version on a bracelet instead of a leather strap this time. Another realization that I came to was always buy the watch on the bracelet. I think that that's a good rule of thumb. There's tons of leather straps out there that you can get after the fact, generally speaking, assuming it's not a fitted strap that's specific to the model of watch we're talking about. But nevertheless, I do digress a little bit. I replaced that watch. At some point around there, I added a very simple $50 Casio G-Shock, the DW5600. That's another watch that I absolutely love. I will never be without a Casio DW5600. I like all G-Shocks actually, but yeah, I don't know. So most of them are just too big. This one fits me perfectly. As a matter of fact, it's the watch that I'm wearing right now, and I wear it pretty frequently. Of course, the Submariner gets the majority of my wrist time, but I absolutely love this watch. I'll always have one. Since I got the Submariner, I said, do I really need a black dial, black bezel Seiko SKX? I love that watch. I like the Jubilee bracelet. It made most sense to me to get a 009, the Pepsi version, because I still had that yearning for a Pepsi watch. Now, technically, I still have both of them, but the 007 will probably get sold off at some time when I get around to it. I'll always keep a Seiko SKX in my collection, probably this 009. So what do we have now? Basically a Submariner, a Seiko SKX, a Hamilton Khaki Field, and my Casio DW5600. What would I suggest to the people that say, what should I do with my collecting habits? Well, only you can really decide. I came to the conclusion myself that I don't want a huge collection of watches, even if money were no object, and I could have nothing but Rolexes and Audemars Piguets and Patek Philippe's. I still wouldn't want 12 or 15 or 20 watches. I want watches that I love, that I want to wear all the time, and when I have to make that decision of what should I wear today, I want it to be a difficult decision. I just didn't get that sense when I had a box full of affordable watches. I liked all of them, and again, they were all very good quality watches, high value watches in most cases, but it was more of a rush to switch instead of a reluctance to decide. And for me, that is the way that I want to collect watches. I want a small collection, I want a concise collection, and I want to really appreciate everything that's a part of it. What am I thinking of in the future? Well, my future collecting goals are actually really simple. Basically, I want to add one new watch to my collection every year at most. Maybe every other year. It depends on the watch. I want it to be a watch that I'm certain is going to fit into my collection, that I'm going to love, that it is going to be something that I want to wear every single day, and making that decision to try and pull something else out of the box to replace it on my wrist, it has to be a difficult decision. It has to be hard for me to want to take it off. So yeah, over the course of the next several years, if I get 1 or 2 more watches, that's probably going to be a surprise. Unless they're really affordable and for some reason they really sing to me. There's a few watches that do that. Example being the Hamilton Khaki Field. You can buy it for under $400 and I absolutely love that watch. If something like that popped up that really reached out to me and really sang to me, I would absolutely pick that up as well. But yeah, for the most part, it's going to be things like the Omega Speedmaster. That's a watch that I'm really struggling with right now. I'm thinking about picking one up. I haven't entirely decided yet. Perhaps another Rolex, the 36mm Oyster Perpetual. That's a watch that I am really turned on by. It really appeals to me. Whatever I decide, though, it's not going to be filling up a box as fast as I can. I'm no longer checking off boxes. That's a really common thing that people do when they're collecting. I've got to have a chronograph. I've got to have a GMT. I've got to have a diver. I've got to have a dress watch. I don't feel that way. I got to have watches that I love. And, you know, it's going to take time, and I'm in absolutely no rush to fill up my watch box anymore. So there's always going to be regrets with collecting in hobbies like this. And like I had mentioned, the Rolex Explorer, it was both a regret when I bought it and a regret when I sold it. It turned out to be not the right watch for me. Technically speaking, I think it turned out to be not the right watch for me at that time. That was my first high-end or luxury watch, and the Submariner would have been a much better first choice for me. Now, after a while, I think I would be able to probably appreciate that a little bit more. I think I would like to have it in my collection a little bit more, being as a second Rolex watch, not the first one. I can't really say for sure. There were a lot of little things about that watch that I didn't like. The summation of all of those little things just ended up weighing on me, and I decided, you know, this isn't the right watch right now, and I let it go. In the future, could I see myself adding another Explorer? Probably not, because one of the biggest problems that I had with that watch was the way that it felt on the wrist, and that was a combination of a number of factors, but the size, it just felt a little bit off. The bezel on that watch, being a smooth polished bezel, was a little bit weird in the way that it was proportioned. It was a lot of dial. If they ever reissued the Explorer as a 36mm watch, I would almost certainly pick one up. I would at least have to think about it pretty heavily. The point being, though, there's going to be all kinds of regrets. You're going to have to do some trial and error to find out what works for you. You're going to regret buying some watches. You're going to regret selling some watches. That's part of the process. Hopefully you can avoid those pitfalls as much as possible. And my new philosophy in only purchasing one watch that I feel like I'm really, really sure about, maybe every year or every other year, is in an effort to avoid those pitfalls for me. Whether or not you want to follow that example is entirely up to you. We're all different. We all have different tastes and we all have different tolerances as far as those things go, but that's the plan that I'm trying to stick to. So what's the moral of the story here? My collection, it's small. My collecting strategy, to add very few watches to it and make sure that as best as I can, they're going to be watches that I absolutely love and not just watches that I'm trying to buy in order to fill up my watch box or check off boxes from this imaginary list of things that I think I have to have. What would I suggest for you guys based on some of the questions that I've seen over the past few months and years? Well, let's try to address a couple of those. All the time I get questions, should I get X, Y, or Z watch? Insert whatever brands and models you want into those variables. It's a difficult question. It's one that we all probably struggle with. When there's something that you collect, you're very often going to want many different versions of what is relatively the same thing. I don't know how I could suggest that you approach that other than to say spend as much time as possible going to dealers and trying them on, doing research, watching videos, and forming the most informed opinion you possibly can before you decide to pull the trigger. You don't want to end up like I did, disappointed, having regrets, spending what could potentially be a lot of money on something that ultimately turns out to be the wrong choice. Nobody wants to make a mistake, and it's going to happen. I guess what I'm saying is be prepared for a mistake, but do your due diligence in order to avoid it. What's the right number of watches, or what constitutes a watch collection? That's a question I've actually seen a couple of times. There's no right answer there. Is a watch collection more than one watch? Is it a 3-watch collection? Is it a 12-watch box filled up with watches? I don't really know. For me personally, I think a great collection size would be 3 watches. If I wasn't doing YouTube reviews and didn't feel the need to bring in watches to show off on the channel, and luckily I haven't had to do that a lot lately because of all of the generosity of you guys. I've gotten a ton of watches on loan, but if it was that I was just a normal watch collector, I would say 3 watches would be perfect. For me, what would those 3 watches be? Right now, for sure, it would be the Submariner. That would be one of the top ones. I would want something a little bit more casual and understated, and that's kind of what I'm looking for right now. Been strongly considering things like the Tudor Black Bay 36mm Oyster Perpetual. Something sporty, something a little bit double duty, something that I can wear on any occasion. For that 3rd watch, I don't exactly know. Probably another sports watch, maybe something with a complication. That Speedmaster really is kind of reaching out to me right now. But those are things that we all have to decide as we go through this process. Anyway, the moral of the story is I think 3 watches are great. There's really no need to get carried away. If you want to, if that's what works for you though, get 10 watches, get 12 watches, get whatever makes you happy. That's the goal here, is to try to make yourself happy, to have some enjoyment in your life. And if you enjoy having multiple watches, by all means, do what makes you happy. Something that I see pop up a lot on other YouTube channels, message boards, discussion groups, forums, a lot of watch collectors seem like what they're really trying to do is one-up the next guy, get something better than somebody else has. I really don't recommend that. I don't think that it's a healthy approach to watch collecting, and it's certainly not a healthy approach to life. You don't need to show off. You don't need to impress anyone else. This hobby is for you. A lot of people will say things like, I don't want to wear a Submariner because everyone has them and it attracts attention. Everyone will notice it. Listen, nobody notices your watches. I mean, we're using a little bit of hyperbole here. If you go into a watch store, obviously somebody's going to notice it. If you go out to a nightclub and you bump into a woman that is honed into looking for maybe a man with money, okay, she might be looking for it. But by and large, the only people that are knowing what watch you're wearing are other watch enthusiasts. You don't really need to impress anybody. Largely, it goes ignored. So, do what you want for yourself. Don't think about trying to one-up anybody else. Don't think about trying to impress anybody else. Don't feel pressured into trying to keep up with the Joneses, as the saying goes. Don't feel guilty if you like quartz watches, even though it seems like a very vocal majority, and I honestly think it's a minority, of people online lambast quartz watches as being toys and being garbage and being something that you shouldn't even waste your time and money on. If that's what you like, that's fine. I have some quartz watches. Obviously, my Casio DW5600. I have an old circa 1980s quartz Seiko watch that I paid something like $25 for, and it's a great little watch. I like it. It's a two-tone. It's, most people would think that it's hideous. I enjoy that little watch. I forgot to mention that in the list of watches that I have. I picked that up off of eBay ages ago. There's nothing wrong with quartz watches. If that's what you like, don't worry about what other people think or say or do. Just do you. Alright guys, I guess I'll wrap this up. It's getting kind of long. I could probably ramble about this topic for another half hour easily, but I get complaints all the time that my videos are too long. I apologize to anyone that doesn't like that. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for indulging me. Thanks for listening to me ramble for a little while. That's basically the state of my collection, my thoughts on my personal collecting strategy, things that I want to do for myself moving forward. Maybe a couple of ideas on things that you can think about in your own life and your own collecting strategy. I'm just one guy. I've got opinions like all of us, and they're really no better than anybody else's. But I thought I would share. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for tuning in. As always, down in the description of this video and every video that I do is a list of ways that you can help support the channel. If you'd like to follow me on social media, that would help me out. I have links to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I could always use more help over on Patreon. Big thanks to the guys that have been over on Patreon supporting me. That means the world to me. Finally, there's a link to Amazon through my affiliate account. If you like anything that I've reviewed and you're thinking about purchasing it, or anything else for that matter, click on my Amazon affiliate link first. I get a small commission. Those commissions do add up. A lot of you guys have been using that link, and I really do appreciate it. So I'm going to wrap this up, and yeah, till later on next week. Bye now.